Liana, thank you very much, and hello everyone. A warm welcome to this conversation with Rangin Dadfar Spantar, the former Foreign Minister of Afghanistan. Dr. Spantar, a very warm welcome to you as well. It's great to have you with us, especially given the fact that you, like so many others, were only narrowly able to escape being trapped in Afghanistan. You were among those leaving your country via Kabul airport during those dramatic days in August. Now, the news that we're getting from Afghanistan are very grim. The latest news is that the Taliban banned movies, TV series with female characters starring in them. That, of course, leaves the choice of what can be broadcast very limited. The banking system also is in free fall, on the verge of collapse. And as Liana already mentioned, we face a very dire humanitarian crisis, mass starvation, famine. So that is the picture as we read it from Berlin. But can you give us an update from your perspective, both politically, economically, and also in terms of the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan?
Oh, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. I'm very happy to be here. First of all, allow me to tell you that we Afghans, like international community, the big part of international community, was not ready about the collapse of Kabul and on August 15th. This days was a working days, although all of us, we were prepared that will happen, but not on the 15th of August, because the reports from the Secret Service of Afghanistan and other countries, they told us we have some more days or 2 or 3 weeks time. A delegation was prepared to go to Doha for discussing the handing over to an interim government with the participations of other groups under the lead of Taliban. Personally, I had my normal meeting with the Iranian delegation and this day, on August 15, on 9/13. But the speed of the development after the escape of former President of Afghanistan, Dr. Ashraf Ghani, was surprisingly unbelievable fast, so that the Taliban arrived the cities and other places now, and the people, they were under threat or having the feeling to be under threat. They escaped from Kabul.
Taken by surprise.
Exactly, exactly. And I was one of them. And August afternoon, 15 August afternoon, I left my house just before Taliban arrived my house, and went to the airports with the support of Turkish authorities. I left Kabul on the 16th of August. But the current situation is really, we are facing a countrywide catastrophic situation in Afghanistan. First of all, it is a humanitarian catastrophe, and the second is the political and social catastrophe. The women and young people, and urbanized women and young people, they are organizing a peaceful resistance, but the reaction from the current Taliban authority is very vehement. And additional to that, in countryside, in Panjshir Valley and also Andarab Valley and other sites, we have an armed resistance against Taliban. But as you mentioned, this economical system in Afghanistan is collapsed because all structures doesn't working in Afghanistan. The national government does not exist. The government cannot exercise a power monopoly monopoly over the government systems. The army is not exist, the police forces, etc., etc. And guerrilla groups, they come in the city, they are not ready to govern, but they are ready to rule in Afghanistan. We have to make a difference between ruling in one country and having governance in one country. And the lack of governance is a real phenomena in Afghanistan today.
That's an important point, Dr. Spantar. I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think it is one thing to lead a guerrilla war, and that is exactly what the Taliban did. And it's absolutely another thing to run a country. And you also differentiated between ruling a country and governing a country. So you mentioned the dire economic situation, the lack of funds that the Taliban can command, plus also the international isolation of the regime. So that, of course, makes it super hard for them to actually run the country properly. So my question to you would be, with that in mind, what is a likely scenario? I mean, will we see consolidation? Seems not very likely. Or will we see collapse eventually?
Well, regardless to the actions and behaviors of international community, in these situations, Taliban and groups, how they are dealing in Kabul, they cannot build a functioning countrywide government because this is a sectarian behavior and structure in Afghanistan. As you know, in this multi-ethnic society, we need a broader participations in Afghanistan so that the population of Afghanistan has the feeling that is my country and this is my government, and this is not an inclusive government, that is an exclusive government. And the main fractions also, they are fighting each other in Afghanistan. From my point of view, the main responsibility from the international community today is how we are dealing with the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. But this is a difficult issue. How we can make a difference between helping the people of Afghanistan to reduce the pain and difficulties that they are facing today. The social misere of Afghan people is one thing, but from other things, from other sides, how we can not go to regular bilateral, multilateral relations with a government that is denied the participation its own people and is denying accepting the principles of people participation, elections as principles of a normal government. And this, between these two difficult issues, we have to make a difference. My fear today is that some countries, they are feeling to be under pressure because the rivalry or competitions with the regional powers in Asia and in our regions, and that must not be the determination of bilateral relation with Taliban.
Before we go to that regional dimension, Dr. Spantar, I wanted to ask you to sort of dig a little deeper on the point of what is the expectation from the international community in general and the West in particular. And you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a very difficult balancing act for the international community and for the Western countries. They have adopted a policy of non-recognition of the Taliban, as you rightfully said, but do entertain limited contacts on humanitarian issues. Just recently, a team of German diplomats was in Kabul. So what is your advice? I mean, how can the West manage this balancing act? And of course, that begs the follow-on question: what should be conditions for a recognition, if any?
Well, from the point of view of people of Afghanistan, the central question today is surviving, because the results of 43 years destructive war in Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is since 3 years or more than 3 years immensely impacted by drought, extreme drought situations. And additional to that, that is the systematically collapse of state structures. Now the government in Afghanistan cannot deliver services and support the life of its population, cannot pay the salary of teachers and former soldiers and state employees, etc., etc.
Sorry to interrupt you. When you say the sort of the systemic problems, you refer also to the era pre-Taliban. Is that correct?
Of course. This is the continuation, but not in this dimension. And now we are facing an extreme situation, which caused by collapse of state structures and an absence of statehoods, I will see. But I think the international community, they will do their own things. But if you allow me to tell you first, I'm supporting any humanitarian help and support for the people of Afghanistan, for reducing the problem and hunger, catastrophic situation, etc., etc. But I'm fully aware about the independence feeling and structural independency feeling that caused. In the past, we have experienced our own experiences in this regard. But from other hand, the interaction with the government of Taliban, or so-called government of Taliban, must be condition-based. That means respecting human rights, women's rights, respecting the rule of law, and stopping this extrajudiciary killing, systematically killing and arresting the population of Afghanistan.
And these are all conditions that are far from being met at this point in time.
Yes, but that is no changes today in behavior of Taliban. As
That's
you know, despite all difficulties and deficits that the governments of Afghanistan has in the past 20 years, but under our governments in the last 20 years, around 12 million children, including women, they visited schools and universities. We had a free media in Afghanistan, which today is not the case now. And we had a constitution. And today Afghanistan probably is the only country in the world without any legal base that the people can think that is the framework for my political and legal life. And we are a number of mullah, they are governing per decree daily and in a very sectarian way and exclusive for themselves.
I do understand the point of sort of recognition having to be made contingent on conditions, having to be condition-based. Now, again, I mean, we do see that those conditions are very far from being met at this point in time. If we look at the behavior of the Taliban regime at this moment, and I wonder, I mean, how should we go about dealing with the Taliban in the meantime? You say that we have to help them on the humanitarian front, and that seems very logical, looking at the dire situation in Afghanistan. At the same time, there is also the risk that this again will legitimize the Taliban to some extent, right? Because they can then say, okay, look, we still got a grip on the very difficult humanitarian situation. How do we manage this dilemma? I'm not trying to insinuate that we shouldn't help, but that's a dilemma after all, right?
Yes, this is a dilemma, but we have to choose between how we can protect the life of people of Afghanistan, or how we can deliver a minimum of opportunity and possibility for the people to survive. This is one choice. And the other choice is, of course, that the government in Kabul will misuse this situation. Look, there is interaction with the international community, but this is not must be not a case, a cause abiding cooperation, humanitarian cooperation, and delivering humanitarian support to the people of Afghanistan. Especially, we have a hard winter in Afghanistan and in countryside Afghanistan, especially in countryside Afghanistan. I'm sure you read and the people, they know about some families, they offer their own children to sell the children for surviving.
Yeah, that's a terrible situation.
And under these circumstances, to be a maximalist, which is politically, I am one of them. It is painful for me as a man that he lost everything. I lost my country, my everything there. To appeal for cooperation, but I am appealing for humanitarian cooperation and support for my people, and from other hand, not delivering political legitimacy to a government that is excluding its own people and exercising extrajudiciary actions against any intellectual, media, women, etc.
That point is well understood, Dr. Spantar. Thanks very much. What I wanted to ask you for is a bit of an evaluation what the developments in Afghanistan, which are far from being encouraging, what they mean for international security. What's your take on that? I mean, one big question people ask themselves here in Europe is obviously, will that trigger another wave of migration from Afghanistan to Europe? What's your sense on that question?
Well, now we have a migrations movement from Afghanistan, but mainly towards our neighboring country, first of all, Iran and Pakistan. As you know, that is the immigrations issue still is not too big towards Europe. That will be a threat. Because the non-existence of national government and the people, especially the educated segment of Afghan society, they lost their own hope and future. They are not seeing their own future in Afghanistan, and they're not seeing the future of their own family in Afghanistan. They all, also for surviving, physically surviving, they are trying leaving Afghanistan to our neighborhoods and also Europe. And if it is a threat for you, but from other hand, I was self a refugee, I cannot describe that as a threat, but I can understand the concern here in European countries and others, but that they mean to help Afghanistan people having a legitimate political body as government and not this kind of despotism that we are facing today, this broader fundamental despotism that we are facing in our daily life.
And you rightfully mentioned, Dr. Spantar, that by far the largest number of people fleeing from Afghanistan actually end up in the neighboring countries. So from your point of view, what would be a useful European contribution when it comes to helping those countries dealing with that influx of people coming from Afghanistan?
This is another dilemma. This is not a simple issue because our experience is showing us that in the past, during the Soviet invasions, that humanitarian support for Afghan refugees mainly was delivered and managed by some neighboring countries, especially Pakistan. No? And that caused tremendous tremendous independency to these countries, recruitment, etc., etc. And we have to find way that this kind of delivering services or support to the refugees will be managed by the country they are providing support to Afghanistan or Afghan body in Afghan NGOs, etc. And the same issue is, I read by Iranian authorities that they are received more than 300,000 refugees from Afghanistan since August 15th. And that is enormous humanitarian problem or social problem also for Iran. And that's required also a kind of humanitarian cooperation with Iranian authorities regarding to supporting food and accommodations and education for the children of Afghanistan. From my point of view, helping in Afghanistan and cooperating together the international communities, especially with the regional countries, also including regional countries in Afghanistan's neighborhoods, have a coordinated actions for support for Afghanistan, coordinated actions also encouraging the political circles in Afghanistan cooperating for building a broader national government in Afghanistan and respecting the decisions of people by realizing in a few years elections.
And there are efforts underway to do exactly that, Dr. Spantar. I wanted us to stay a little bit with the issue of neighboring countries, and you already mentioned this big Afghan neighbor that is always an issue for debate, Pakistan, of course. For all intents and purposes, Pakistan has great influence over the Taliban. And against that backdrop, Islamabad seems to be one of the main beneficiaries of the Taliban takeover. And I understand also, having talked to some people from Afghanistan, that there is a concern that this Pakistani influence will be even further felt in Afghanistan. Some people even talk about a protectorate, a Pakistani protectorate. Do you share that concern, and how should the international community also deal with Pakistan, which is an ambivalent actor in this whole game?
Oh, for myself and for my country, this is a very painful, long history with our neighbor Pakistan. From one hand, we had a lot of commonality with Pakistan now. And we can be and should be good neighbors and work with each other and the regional context and regional integrations. That must be and can be our future. But this is not the case. Our demand from international community, since I also was part of the government in 2006, was dealing with Pakistan, stopping its proxy against the people of Afghanistan and against our country. But since August 15, Pakistan is overall in the international institutions and politics is speaking in the name of Taliban. And that is not correct, because Pakistan must respect the independency and national unity and territorial integrity of Afghanistan. That's the central demands that we, the Democrat of Afghanistan, we have. And from my point of view, the international community has to recognize this reality, not providing, as the United States did in the last 20 years with $36 billion supported, paid money for Pakistan. They have to also cooperate with Pakistan conditionally and not giving a blank check to Pakistan doing everything in Afghanistan. One of the main reasons, not only, why we are resisting now, or the people of Afghanistan is resisting, is the influence of Pakistan, and that will never accept by the people of Afghanistan.
And we're already now deeply into geopolitical questions also, when it comes to the current situation in your country, Dr. Spantar. And this is a good moment to take a question which was posed by a number of our viewers online, namely which role China will play in Afghanistan. And here again, Pakistan also comes into the picture to some extent. So what about China?
Well, my appeal will be to work together with China, Russia, India, Pakistan, Iran, and Turkey, and other neighbors of Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, together, helping building an regional and also international consensus on Afghanistan, and a state putting everything in competition, geopolitical competition, which is the case today. From Afghan point of view, of course, we are expecting from international community to work together with each other in Afghanistan and not turning Afghanistan into a rivalry hurt between the regional and international powers, which I'm seeing this sign, and that is one of the concerns that the Afghan today have.
So this is a very clear plea that Afghanistan should not become a locus where the great power rivalries of sorts are being played out. Also with a view to very interesting questions that are coming from our viewers, Dr. Spantar, I wanted to kind of circle back a little bit and look again at the situation in in Afghanistan at this point in time, and look at the issue of terrorism and the role of terrorist forces such as ISK, the so-called Islamic State Khorasan. We have seen an uptick in those terrorist attacks in recent weeks and months. And what's interesting to be watched is that the Taliban now kind of have to move from being an insurgent force themselves to actually doing counterinsurgency to some extent. And you already mentioned it's totally unclear whether they'll be able to really establish a monopoly on the use of force, on the use of violence in the country. So what does that mean if we look at the situation? Do we see Afghanistan once again turning into a breeding ground for terrorist activities, which will also go beyond Afghanistan's borders? Or I guess the question here is, are you concerned that we will see international terrorist attacks again emanating from Afghanistan?
That is difficult to describe how we'll see the future there regarding to the international activities of terrorist groups. But we know that there is a number of international terrorist groups. They worked in the past also with Taliban in some way. Now, a number of members of these groups was released in 2020, and also just after the takeover of Taliban in Afghanistan. And we are facing increasingly terrorist activities in Afghanistan, especially in the urbanized part of Afghanistan under the name of Daesh. And this is not only in the east part, which earlier was east and north, under the activities happen under what you call IS, and in Afghanistan we are calling Daesh. That's the same. But increasingly we are facing these terrorist activities. We lost in last month a big number of the Afghan innocent civilian people in the mosques, etc., which was attacked by ISK in Afghanistan. This is a serious concern. Finding a solution for this problem. In the first step, we need a legitimate, broader government of Afghanistan, a government which had the support of the whole population of Afghanistan, represent the national unity of our people, and with the participation of all groups. One of the main reasons why the former government of Afghanistan lost, not only, was that the government lost the support of people of Afghanistan. And that make the things for Taliban much easier taking over all in the countryside and the cities also. And abiding this scenario, then required building a legitimate government of Afghanistan, reestablishing the rule of law in Afghanistan, having a constitutions, and an interim government with the participations of the representative of the people.
And this, of course, should be on the list of the international community when it comes to conditions for any type of recognition for the government. Dr. Spantar, I wanted to ask you, before I come back to some questions that are asked here from our viewers, I wanted to ask you to hark back a little bit, to the early 2000s and the way the international community dealt or didn't deal with the Taliban at that time. I read an interesting interview with former President Karzai in Der Spiegel recently, in which he said, and I'm paraphrasing, that back in 2001 at the Petersburg conference, the Taliban should have been included in the talks. Do you agree? I mean, would things have taken a way different course in Afghanistan if this had been the case back then?
Well, we have to make a difference between what was desirable, and aftermath, everybody is knowing better the things. At that time, from one hand, Taliban was not ready to talk with us, with the different groups of Afghanistan, but from other hand, the international community thought that they can eliminate Taliban by force, using force on bombing, etc., etc. And also some current Taliban leaders at that time, that they was ready to cooperate with the government, and that was rejected by the leader of international community in Afghanistan. And some very prominent Taliban leaders was at that time for cooperation. They put down the weapon, but it was rejected by international forces in Afghanistan, and the government of Afghanistan was too weak at that time to deal with this issue. I'm talking about 2002 and 3. And then we have the case, the re-emerging of Taliban with cooperation support of Pakistan. Then was happened in 2005-6. It was beginning the issue, using Afghanistan and bringing Afghanistan back into a proxy war.
And when you look at your own time in government, which was, I think, as a foreign minister from 2006 to 2010, do you sometimes feel, wow, there were things that we should have been differently when it comes to dealing also with the Taliban and their role at the time?
First, in my first interview as foreign minister of Afghanistan in June 2006, I told, I'm quoting myself, we cannot win this war in this way. We have to fight the cause, not the symptom. At that time, that was my position all the time.
And what was your sense of the cause? I understand the Taliban are the symptom, so what is the cause?
Well, only bombing the Afghan villages is not the solutions. but we have to adapt the people and win the people of Afghanistan by delivering better servicing, realizing good governance, and having our own independence without to impose from abroad. But you have to do this and that.
That
or not do
once
in
used
this.
winning the hearts and minds, right?
Tell you one Minister of Defense from a very big country, for example, told as we talked about the difficulties. So I cannot fight green by green. That some bad element in Afghanistan was friend from international community and at that time. That's the first one. Then the second. By diplomatic and economic measures, it was possible bringing Pakistan to constructive cooperation with Afghanistan. But it was rejected. This demand from our side was rejected by all relevant capitals of international community. From our point of view, was probably better first. Having more independency in Afghanistan and exercising this independence and challenging the authorities of those countries they impose to us by building our cabinet and government and also handling against bad government that partially, but that government caused not industrial suicide problems in the countries and other countries, no? But this industrial suicide problem was a protection from abroad.
So maybe we can go into that issue a little further with an interesting question that was handed in by Kai Brinkman, who is among our viewers. And this is what he asks. The past governments were not able to fully extend governance and justice to the depth of Afghanistan, nor is this likely under the Taliban. And we discussed this before. What does it take to bring back Afghanistan to a state of stability that it maintained from the 1930s to the 70s? Question mark. What's your take, Dr. Spantar?
Well, I don't have a simple answer. Our governments in the last 20 years, we had also our difficulties, but we cannot compare what we had at that time with the current situations. But the freedom of speech, freedom of press, women's rights and human rights, etc., etc. We never had political detainees in Afghanistan. But today is country. We have a country which is with lawlessness in Afghanistan. We have to cooperate with Afghanistan that in an evolutionary way, going forwards and developing its own structures on the base of the will of its populations.
And we have to find mechanisms for this will of the population to be rightfully expressed. And this sort of fits in nicely with another question from our viewers. A whole generation of young people, especially women in Afghanistan, has been thrown back to the dark ages now under the Taliban. What would you say to this generation, Dr. Spantar?
Well, now I'm in a safe position today personally, although my family is not in a safe position. A peaceful continuation of resistance, peaceful and civilian continuation of resistance in Afghanistan is the only way, is no another choice. Thinking and mainly on its own power. Building the future of Afghanistan must be the main task of our people, and we have to learn and make our own experiences and developing our own democracy, but that doesn't mean this is in contradictory to fundamental universal principles of democracy, but adapting and implementing on the condition of Afghanistan.
And when you talk about peaceful resistance, what chances do you see for that peaceful resistance? What we see at the moment is repression increasing. So who's going to have the upper hand in the long run?
Thank God that there's our young generation, and especially women in Afghanistan, they are exercising daily. They're exercising daily, and this is not the end of the story. So far, the resistance is continuing in different way, in the mountain, in villages, and also in the cities. That will be the only way building a peaceful future for Afghanistan. I'm not in the position giving a proposal for peaceful solution, but I am a citizen of Afghanistan. I'm one of those linked for a peaceful future. Peace for our desire and is our longing. That is the main reason, because before August 15th, we all support a peaceful solution for Afghanistan by adapting the Taliban on all political forces in our countries and giving an end to this enduring war in Afghanistan. Since 43 years, Afghanistan is facing a brutal war. As you know, the religions war in Europe was not longer as 30 years and caused tremendous destruction and devastations in Europe, and today in Afghanistan we are facing 43 years of war. We have to give an end, and for this purpose we need a cooperation with all Afghans and also with the international community.
Dr. Spantar, that is an almost perfect closing statement for this very interesting session. Thank you very, very much. Of course, we wish you all the best personally for your family, but also, of course, for Afghanistan. Thank you very much, dear viewers. Now, please stay tuned for our next session on the findings of our latest survey, focusing on transatlantic relations and the era of transformation. Thank you very much. And now, Liana, back to you.